Hi, I'm Tamara Zoner. Welcome to Spirit Cafe. Come in, sit down, and grab a cup of love. Welcome, Spirit Cafe fans, viewers, listeners. Welcome back to another new world of Spirit Cafe, where instead of always talking about spirituality without the guilt or dogma of religion, which we will, we're also having conversations to perk up your soul. And today I have a wonderful guest with me named Shana Francesca, and I'm just going to get right to it. Shana, welcome to Spirit Cafe.
Thanks, Tamara. I'm very glad to be here.
You are so welcome. So, as I was mentioning before, I don't like to know a ton about my guests because I really love authentic conversations and I love this process of getting to know somebody. So, would you just introduce yourself and tell us what you are compelled for us to know?
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Shana Francesca, and I help people live more joyful, connected lives through the principles of life design. My background is I grew up in a really traumatic household in a very dogmatic, religious, evangelical Christian environment. I now understand that I grew up in a cult. Um, and and it definitely formed so much of my world. I was diagnosed as what we now call neurodivergent, but with ADHD at the age of 5, which many doctors now believe is as a result of trauma suffered while your brain's developing, which has kind of compounded the world and made me feel even more separated because it felt like my brain operated in a completely different way than everyone else's. And that's true, it does. Um, so I really started looking for ways to connect with the world around me. And what I started noticing is my connection to my physical environment. And what I've come to understand now is that our physical environment, specifically our home, it is a direct reflection of our beliefs about ourselves. And we spend about, now in modern society, about 2/3 of our life inside of our home. And because of that, it becomes the stage from which we tell the story of our life. And even as a young person, I started recognizing that every time something really traumatic would happen, I would alter my physical environment. I would organize something, I would move things around, I would change around my bedroom furniture. And I started to kind of recognize it as kind of breaking my association with what was and resetting the stage, right? I needed a fresh perspective. And eventually I discovered that interior design was a thing, and that kind of worked really well with the fact that I had spent most of my childhood simply existing inside my imagination, and creating physical environments that felt like they were true, honest reflections of my clients, not about a trend, not about a specific style, not about any of that, but a true, authentic reflection of who my clients were. And the way I started to work with them was creating the story, sitting down with them and getting clear on the story they wanted their life to tell. And then me being able to, through my lens and the way that I viewed them and their story, create a physical environment that reflected who they were and became the stage for that story. And then about 4 years ago, I started to realize just how powerful that was. And I started doing group coaching. And I did that for like 2.5 years. I ended it about, I don't know, like a year into the pandemic shutdown.
Okay.
I worked with that in that 2.5 years. I worked with about 100 people, and I started recognizing that, and none of it was about interior design, but I started to craft this language around life design and recognizing that design is a function of intention. And as soon as we start getting clear on what our intention is, and we start using that as a guidepost, not as a rule book, right? But as a guidepost, as a way of keeping ourselves kind of like a way to touch back, a grounding, if you will. When we start recognizing that and start applying intention to all the little decisions we make every day, we start to build a foundation and we start to design our lives. And that became this really powerful thing. And now I'm doing public speaking around it and workshops and really enjoying working with, as an interior designer, I can only work with so many people.
Mhm.
But in sharing this message in a larger way, I can work with so many more people. It's so much more exponentially valuable. And so I'm really just enjoying that journey from working with just a few clients to, dozens of people at a time.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, you're touching so many more souls this way. I love, like, 2 things really stuck out for me. First, intention, because that's one of the things that I teach too, like, how you can just wander through life, or you can have
Yes.
an intention for what you're creating very consciously in your life. So that resonates with me so much, especially after spending some time at my sister's house this last weekend,
Mhm.
where
Tell
there's
me about that.
there's clearly no intention for their space, right? I we were talking about stress because I was in Maryland to do a keynote on happiness,
Yeah.
and I saw her unhappiness and her stress, and I said, Jen, you have no place of peace in this whole house. The there's so much clutter, not on the main floor, but the main floor is taken over by 4 dogs. And and the
Lord.
upstairs, there's, like, so much clutter, and the downstairs is packed with toys that the kids probably haven't touched in
Mm,
years.
yeah.
So there's no place of peace, there's no intention, and there's no
Yeah.
intentional use of the space. I would
It
love
sounds
to
like she might feel overwhelmed as well.
She
Like there's a lot
does.
going on
Yes.
in her life, and
Yep,
so it's
because
really, and I recognize that it's really hard sometimes to get to a place of intention when we're so distracted by all the things that are demanding our attention, right?
absolutely.
And
Yes,
so, trying to find those, I get that it's really hard to find that time to get intentional, but when you do, when you can,
mhm.
even if you ask a friend or a neighbor to watch the kids and the dogs for an hour, right?
Right.
Like separate people. Hey, can you take the dogs? Hey, can you
Yeah,
take the kids?
exactly.
And get an hour to yourself and just sit with a journal and just start to write down, if you there was nothing stopping you, no financial barriers, no relationship barriers, no nothing, what would your life look like? No judgment, because the page never judges, only people do,
Mhm.
right? And so we really need to just get it all out. Don't judge it. Let it be what it is. And then we can start to realize what is no longer serving us and in what ways we need to build community around ourselves to be able to support not only ourselves, but one another in achieving these dreams. Because we're not meant to achieve our dreams on our own. We're certainly not. That's a lie. That's the American dream. That's
Right.
the nuclear family. And the American dream is really a nightmare. Um, and so it's kind of like, did anybody, I don't know if anybody listening to this ever watched The Good Place.
Oh,
But
yes.
The Good Place is absolutely an allegory about America.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That's a good
That's a
place.
good show. I don't watch a lot of
Um,
television, but that is a really good
This is a good show. I'm mostly a documentary person, but somehow I got hooked on that, and I was like, this show is incredible. But we start to realize um, that we don't have to buy into any of the lies that we're told. There are no rules we do not give power to. And so when we start to release those rules and we start to realize what life we really want, we start to give ourselves permission to exit out of other people's expectations.
Yes, and that's so important, and I feel like this is something that is necessary to teach children at a younger age, because most of us happen upon it when we've been blindly walking through our life and things get really crappy, and then we're like, "Wait a second, I don't have to live this pre-programmed life that I was told
Yes.
by society that I have to live." But we don't know that because we're not informed. And
Yeah.
I hope as a parent that I'm informing my children that you can do
Yeah.
whatever you want to. You don't have to do these things in this order and check all these boxes. And I think, so many more people need permission to
Yes.
break free from
Yeah.
cultural standards. The other thing I loved that you said, and that made me think about my own childhood, was how you would rearrange for a new, fresh start. And I realized as you were talking that I used to rearrange my room all of the time.
Mhm.
All of the time. And there was a lot of fighting between my parents in my house. So it was a chaotic, kind of traumatic, violent, not
Yes.
physically violent, but very emotionally violent household when I was young. And I would go and blast music and rearrange my room and clean the hell out of it
Yep.
to feel like a cleaner, calmer energy.
Yeah, because everything is made of energy. And so the energy of I mean, it's like, and sometimes I think people get, especially those of us who grew up in heavily religious environments, I think sometimes we get really like, woo, like when we hear people say everything is energy, but science tells us that is true. And
Yes.
also, and also, we've all been that person, or I would imagine that most people have been that person where you've had your back to the door of a room, right? You might have been in a group setting of any various sizes, and all of a sudden, you've got your back to the door, so you can't see who walks in, but somebody walks in, and the entire energy of the room changes,
Hmm. Hmm.
bad, good, otherwise, and you feel it immediately, and you haven't seen them, spoken to them, they haven't said a word. So we absolutely know that each one of us and everything around us carries energy. And so when that negative energy is trying to make its way into your safe space, of course, you're going to do everything you can to cleanse it out, to protect the energy that you have in your own space, and to make sure that you're creating your room, especially your bedroom,
Right.
as, because it's our cocoon, right? It's the place that holds us sacred and safe for 8 hours
Where
every
we're
day when we
supposed to
sleep.
restore and renew and
Yes,
refresh. And,
yes,
to tack onto that energy talk, the Institute of Heart Math actually studies the heart and its relationship to happiness, and they have found that the energy of our heart, there
yes,
are waves that extend 8 to 10 feet
yes.
out. So it's
It's
not
an
just
electromagnetic
woo-woo,
field.
people.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is a magnetic field, and so we
yeah,
literally can feel
mhm,
negativity or positivity, openness, closed.
yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
there's a concept in gentle parenting around sitting in instead of time out,
Oh
right?
my gosh,
Where
tell us more about
where kids who have, because again, I grew up, I'm neurodivergent. Sometimes I refer to it as neurospicy. Um, so
I will
I'm
tell my oldest that. I love
yeah,
that.
neurospicy. And I have a niece who's also neurospicy. And when she gets, I can tell when she's getting energetically overwhelmed. I'll just say, hey, babe, can you come sit with me for a minute? And we're just going to, we always are face to face. We're as close to heart to heart. If she's comfortable with it, we're hugging, but she always has the right to decide how much physical contact there is. Um, and she'll just sit with me most of the time on my lap, and we'll just kind of sit there and either rock together or kind of, sometimes we do this in the pool, and we'll we'll like be spinning just slowly together, just kind of moving around in a gentle motion, and it's able to, I'm able to use my calm energy to help calm her,
Mhm,
right? It only takes 2 minutes. 2 minutes for us to change someone's energy without saying a word,
mhm.
right? And so that moment of sitting in, I feel like had someone done that for me as a child, I would be a different person, because it's a moment to be seen, to be felt, to be understood, to be allowed to feel and process our emotions, but also know that that's a moment for community. Community is built in those moments when we sit with one another. And as like a side note, I someone asked me how I define love a couple years ago at the beginning of the pandemic on Clubhouse. I was part of this like group of people holding these beautiful conversations every Sunday, and we'd have like 800 people in these conversations. And someone asked me what my definition of love is, and what came out immediately was it is seeing someone,
Mhm.
right, and being willing to never look away,
Oh, I love that. I love
right, because that's so vulnerable.
Yeah, yes.
It's so vulnerable, and so that's how we build community, is to be willing to be seen and to see, because if we're seeing, it's because we're being seen, right? So it's
Right,
so vulnerable,
it is.
and to sit with that. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. That's, reminds me of the eye contact experiments where,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
put
yeah.
even two strangers together to just look at each other for 2 minutes, like you mentioned, in
Minutes.
fact, and really be seen and
Mhm.
really see. And, that's our number one human need. We need this
Yes.
connection with one another, and yet we're so afraid of it. But we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, and yet we're scared to be seen and we're scared to
Well,
be heard.
yeah, and I think we're scared to be seen and scared to be heard because capitalism and whiteness in America is all about competition. So
Mhm.
if you're seen, then what capitalism perceives is as your weakness can be exploited,
Yes.
right? And because exploitation is a foundational element of capitalism, we know that we will be exploited for our weakness, but it's not a weakness, it's a strength, right? But someone will manipulate that out of us. And so we've learned to protect ourselves. We've learned that being seen is a terrible thing. And that's when we get hurt the most. And so that's really what life design comes all the way back to, is why I started developing in the first place, is so that we can start creating community, right? But it starts with one, it starts with us. It starts with recognizing, how do we set boundaries? How do we get, like, we can't set boundaries if we're not even sure what we want our life to look like.
Absolutely.
Like, we gotta start at the bare minimum. We gotta start where we should have, with the things we should have been taught as children, but were
Mhm.
programmed out of us, you know?
Yeah. So what was your process, if you would share with us, of starting to recognizing your own programming and breaking free of that?
Oh, this is gonna be a very vulnerable answer, and it's um like a trigger warning.
Okay.
So I was about 15. So at 12, I was forced to take a chastity pledge by my father in front of our 2,000 person church.
Okay.
Just hold on, this will become relevant in a second. He then started grooming me. At the age of 15, he sexually assaulted me. At that time, in that moment, I recognized that there was no way that I could believe a single thing that was being told to me by the people who were inflicting such extreme amounts of trauma
Mhm.
onto me, right? Because if what they were saying was true, what they were doing didn't make any sense.
Right.
And that was the beginning of a fracture in my belief systems, right? I spent the next 10 years trying to believe,
Mm.
trying to find the truth, trying to think that, and thinking that I just didn't love God enough. The people around me didn't love God enough. And then I gave myself permission to just walk away, to start deconstructing at like 24. So it was this process of trying to find the truth and then realizing the truth was very different than what I had been told, and like deconstructing. And so it was a massive fracture that happened. It really caused me to recognize that the things that I had been taught weren't true. They
Mhm.
couldn't be. They weren't aligning, right? And I was told over and over again that Sky Daddy was this merciful person, yet the only prayers that seemed to be answered were by the wicked. And
Mm.
by those of us doing all the suffering, they were never answered. And so
Oh,
I started recognizing that Sky Daddy was a construct. Sky Daddy's not real, right? I do believe in a
Sky
power
Daddy,
that,
that's one we have not used before,
yeah,
Sky Daddy.
yeah, yeah. I do believe that there is an energy that connects us all, but I don't believe there's a puppet master in the sky.
Mhm.
And that's the place that I'm at now. Will that change? Sure, I reserve the right to change my mind. But at this moment, I do not believe in Sky Daddy. And even if I did believe in a Sky Daddy, it wouldn't be the one that I was raised with. I
Mhm.
will not. I will not worship that person. Um, but yeah, it was a very traumatic moment that just kind of was like, I've known it all along that this was crap. This was crap. This isn't real.
Right.
And then the minute that this horrendous trauma, on top of all the other traumas, right? It was like,
Mhm.
it wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back, because it was way bigger than a straw. It was like an anvil that came down on top of years of other trauma and abuse, and I just couldn't reconcile the things anymore. Right?
Right.
I'm like, one and one is not equaling two.
Oh, and it takes a great amount of courage, and I'm wondering, what do you think? So many of us have had that major fracture of whatever our reality currently is, and
Yeah,
finally been able to say, you know, it's time to leave this. It's time to rebuild separately from this, because this is not good for me. This is hurting me. This is maybe even killing me. And to say, okay, I am now pulling my bootstraps up and walking out the door. Do you feel that courage is an innate part of that? Because some people don't ever leave that. Some people would go through a similar circumstance to what you've experienced or what I experienced
yeah,
and would never leave it. So,
yeah.
what do you think the difference is between someone like you who sees it and walks away and rebuilds your life and your soul and your spirit stronger, and
Yeah.
someone who doesn't? Is it a lack of courage, or what do
I
you
don't know. I think it's a whole bunch of circumstances. I mean, I don't think it's a lack of courage. There was this recent study done that those who grow up in heavily conservative Christian environments and typically vote Republican, their beliefs are stored in the fear part of their brain.
Okay,
And
that
I
makes
know that to be
sense.
true, right?
Yes.
And those people who tend to be forward thinkers, challenge the system, and typically vote liberal, more liberal, however they tend to vote, but certainly typically not Republican. Their beliefs are stored in the logic part of their brain. And so, what I actually think is that it's trauma. I
Mhm.
don't think it's necessarily just fear, it's manipulation, and it's trauma. Um, Religion is trauma. Religion is trauma. You cannot convince me otherwise anymore. Religion is trauma
Mhm.
because religion asks for dogmatic, unquestioning belief. And it's the unquestioning where the trauma comes in
Mhm.
because we're told to deny our own experience with something in favor of, well, if your experience isn't just like mine, then it's because you're not spiritual enough, you're not holy enough, you're not dedicated enough. And so you're required to give more and more and more until there's literally nothing left to give and there's no soul left inside of you. I mean, if you think about different stories throughout time, it's that which is literally sucking our soul out of us and it's removing our humanity. It's dehumanizing us and objectifying us,
Mhm.
um, requiring unquestioning servitude.
Right, that's it. It's like they beat the life out of us in order
Correct.
to have us obey, right? Obey no matter what. Do what
Yeah.
you're told no matter
Yes.
what. You're not even allowed to have free
Yeah.
thinking. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure, I'm a disclaimer that there are some religious environments that are loving and supportive.
I'm
But
sure. I'm sure. Yes.
religion as a construct,
Correct. Yes.
yes, is not so much, which is why John and I started this show in the first place because we're
Yeah.
both recovering Catholics
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
also questioned that. I remember, sitting in church, loving the singing part, but
Yeah.
everything
Me too.
else, I was
I was a
just like,
worship leader.
yeah, okay, yeah, and I'm a singer, so I was that the music got me.
Yeah.
And everything else, I remember so often sitting there thinking, "This doesn't make any sense."
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
as a very little person, this doesn't make any sense to me. But, my mother would say, "No, you have to do what you're told," and then when
Yeah.
I said, "I'm not going to church anymore," she cried,
You're going to go
and
to hell. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, "You're gonna go to hell," and I was like, "Well, I don't think so, mom. I just don't need the middleman." Like,
Yeah, the beautiful moment, and this only happened for me like 3 years ago, was when I finally gave myself permission to completely leave the church. I had not attended church regularly in like 2 years, but I was still like, I guess I kind of still have to go sometimes because otherwise I'm going to go to hell. And then I got to the place where I was like, I don't think I actually believe in hell. Am I allowed not to believe in hell? Shoot. I don't believe in hell even if I'm not allowed to. Okay, I don't believe in hell. Woo!
how liberating.
Yeah. And I remember being like, yeah, the book of Revelation wasn't real either. So there's that. Because when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, the whole that Left Behind series was a big thing, and they made it into all these movies, and we were constantly showing them.
Wow.
Like it was constant conversation about being left behind, being left behind, being left behind. And we know that youth are what religion attacks, right? Because when you look at different movements, absolutely horrifying movements of the past, like Nazis,
Mhm.
they came after teenagers. They're indoctrinating teenagers, right? And so that's when my life was in the most turmoil, and it was like you're going to be left behind if you don't. So it was like it doesn't matter what's going on at home, you don't want to be left behind, you know. And it just like fractures your psyche.
Absolutely. Well, you're still so young, your brain's not fully
No,
finished,
correct.
and
Not till you're 26.
right? And it's so like you're wanting to be a part of something even while you're creating your own separate identity, but you don't want to be left behind. No, this is why teenagers do stupid
Because
things.
we need
And
community.
exactly.
Right? That's the
Yes,
thing is that
you need
it's
connection.
it's hijacking our desire for community,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And the place that I've gotten to is like who none of us knows what happens after this life. Like none of us. Period. End of discussion. Nobody knows. So
Right.
if this is the only life that I know I have, that I'm consciously aware of, why is it that you're requiring me to suffer in this one for a life I don't even know exists?
Yeah.
And who gets to decide that?
Yeah.
No, thank you. I'm going to decide and I'm going to be happy right here and right now. And I have moral standing even if I don't worship your God. Because that's always like the attack that comes back is like, well, you just want to be immoral and you just want to do all these things. My life is actually probably more moral than yours, sir, actually, since I left the church.
Yes. I'm like, "No, I don't have to go to church or follow your rules to be a good human being," and that's what I tell my kids, I didn't baptize them even though their father and I were both
Yeah.
technically
Yeah.
Catholic, but I was like, "No, you'll grow up and you'll figure it out yourself, and I'll share my beliefs with you, and other people will share their beliefs
Yeah.
with you, but it's yours to figure
Yeah.
out. Your
Yeah.
spirituality is a gift that you
Yeah.
are meant to figure out." One time
Yeah.
my daughter, she was like 5 years old maybe,
Mm.
and she said to me, "Mommy, what's our purpose in life? Like, why are we here? What are we?" She's
Such a
highly
beautiful question.
intelligent, right? At 4 years old or 5 years old. And I said, "Honey, the
I don't
purpose
know.
is for you to figure that out.
Yeah. I
That's
don't know.
that's I don't
Yeah.
know what it is for
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
can only know what it is for me.
Yeah.
Your job, your purpose
Yeah.
is to figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm your guide. You chose me. This is what I
Right.
believe. You chose me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I will guide you and love you and share my beliefs with you, but ultimately I won't force anything I believe onto you.
Yeah.
My goal for you is to be a good human being."
Yeah, that I mean, that is, and I talk about this all the time with life design in the workshop. It's a main focus is curiosity could cure the world because wrapped up in curiosity is vulnerability, is authenticity, is a consistent desire to learn, to know that we don't know, to know that we are all meant to work together and work in community. All that's wrapped up in curiosity. And so much of our society is meant to program curiosity out of us, even down to small little nursery rhymes like curiosity killed the cat.
Right.
But curiosity didn't kill the cat. It made the dog and the cat best friends, right? Like that's how I love to rephrase it because
I love
we,
that so
we
much.
genuinely, when we get curious, discover such beautiful things about ourselves and about one another. And it becomes this. So, really, that's what it is. To get clear on the story that we want our life to tell, we've got to get curious as to what we actually want. We have to ask that question and give ourselves permission to answer it, which all by itself, just those two things, is a massive breakthrough.
Mm,
Knowing that you have a voice that needs to be heard and should be heard, and you get to listen to it and it gets to take up space and getting curious about what your voice actually is meant for and what you want it to say. Like, those are two very powerful things.
very so powerful. So what do you help your clients do?
Really, I love that question. Really just give themselves permission and empower themselves to have a beautiful life, to tap into joy and connection and community in a really beautiful, authentic way, right? There's no rules that apply to us that we don't say apply. And so when we recognize that, we can live beautiful, joyful, connected lives.
I love that. And so how do you help them do that?
Workshops. We do it through workshops. People can hire me for one on one, but I don't do long term one on one. One on one coaching is that I have coaches that I work with, I have psychologists that I partner with, therapists that I partner with, where if somebody wants long term one on one support, absolutely, I have the people for that, right? So that again, we're building community. I'm not going to pretend like I'm the expert of everything because I'm not.
Right.
I'm gathering lots of experts around me so that we can build community together and create a support system for one another.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So are you still doing interior design or does that
Yeah.
all in? Okay.
Yeah, no, I still do interior design, and that really has just become an outgrowth of the work, right? So when people hire me, and some people just hire me directly as an interior designer still. That aspect is still on my website. It's just kind of, but I still get a lot of referral work that way. But honestly, I got to the place where I recognized that so much of the interior design world is about consumerism and marketing.
Mhm.
And so the way that I work is so different than mainstream interior design that I kind of wanted to separate myself from that and put it all under the umbrella of life design and empower people to do it themselves. And do we have time for like a quick story? Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
okay. So there's a woman who came to me. I had spoken at a networking event And a woman came up to me after and she said, "Hey, I'm in the middle of a really difficult divorce. And, there's these posters up on my wall and I know they have to come down and I want to recreate my space. But thank you for saying what you said." And I was like, "Can we pause just for 1 minute? Can we go back to what you just said? What about the posters? Why do you feel like they have to come down?" She's like, "Well, they're just posters." And I was like, "Okay, what are they of?" And she said, "Well, they're of concerts." I said, "Great. Do you love going to concerts?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Did you get to go to a lot of concerts when you were married?" And she said, "No, I never got to go to concerts because I was always taking care of the family." And I said, "Let me propose that those concerts are a reminder of your wild.
Mm.
And so those posters belong on your walls more than anything else belongs in your house." I'm getting chills.
I love it.
They belong in your house more than anything else. And perhaps the only difference between the way they're represented now and the way that they could be represented is intentionality. Perhaps you just want to arrange them in a more thoughtful way.
Mhm.
Perhaps you want to give them a frame and honor them in the place of honor they decide they really truly can take up, right? Because you and your wild get to take up space in your own home.
Hell yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, especially in any kind of relationship that's been
Yeah.
constrictive. I I was married for 15, legally 16 years to a very controlling man, and like all my fun was stomped out of me.
Fun
More
sucker.
importantly, I gave it away. And it didn't feel safe to express it. And so in my office, which you guys can't see, but like up on the shelves, I've got a Wonder Woman Barbie doll, I've got a Cabbage Patch Kid thing, I've got Muppet
Yeah.
things, Cookie Monster stuff, like
Yeah.
all the little
Play.
joys, all the
Play.
little fun. Yes, play, because it's so vital to
Yes.
play and to tap into your pleasure and what makes you feel alive. And now I laugh really loudly and sing
Yeah.
even louder. And
Yes.
nobody stops me and nobody complains, and if they do, I don't care anymore.
I don't care because I'm built. Yeah, we're here. I'm built and I'm here for my pleasure. You're
Yeah,
here for your pleasure.
yes.
And not to take away someone else's pleasure, right? But to experience
Right.
ours fully and to empower others to do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
beautiful. Oh, so how do people find you, Shana?
My website is the best way. It has all of my contact information there. It has some free videos and things about life design. I'm adding some PDFs on like 6 aspects of life design. So more and more free resources that people can tap into. It is www.concinnate.world, and I'm sure that you might tag it in
I
the show
will.
notes.
Yes.
Because consonate is an unfamiliar word. It's a real word, and I encourage you to look up the definition because it's so beautiful.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, consonate.world, and all my contact information is there. Information is about me, words, about me as a keynote speaker and a writer, and all these different aspects are on there, and information about workshops is there as well.
Excellent. Yay. It's
Yeah.
been such a pleasure talking to you. You
Oh,
have
yes.
beautiful energy. I think that anybody having you on their stage would be quite fortunate, because I talk to a lot of people and a lot of people are very interesting, but you have a genuine energy, a liveliness, a
Thank you.
vitality that's
I
really
really appreciate
beautiful.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
so
that very
welcome.
much.
Okay, listeners, viewers, this is Shana Francesca. I hope you've enjoyed her as much as I have. And I will put all her details in the show notes, and maybe even that if I can pull up that study that you talked about, I'd love to read that more. And also a beautiful quote. I want to leave you with this one, my friends, that comes straight from Shana. Curiosity could cure the world. Love that so much. So beautiful. Thank you for your time, Shana.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us on Spirit Cafe. Please leave all comments on our Spirit Cafe Facebook page or in the comments below our YouTube videos.